everybody? Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast that takes a trip down Philly sports memory lane and asks the question, what if? I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo_Mont, M-O-N-T. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button wherever you're listening to or watching this. Every like and subscription helps us out a lot. And I have to say, I'm very, very excited about this week's episode. I feel the first 4 episodes, we didn't get too deep into some of the what ifs of Philly sports. Trying to find my own feed, give you guys a little bit of a glimpse on what we're going to do. But here we are, episode 5. And I think it's time for us to really, really dive into, to me, one of, if not the biggest what if scenario in definitely Eagles history, but probably Philly sports history. And you can probably guess there's a little bit of a theme here. It's episode number 5. It's also the 17th anniversary of one of the most famous press conferences in Philadelphia sports history. No, I'm not talking about Iverson's. We're talking about practice rant. I'm talking about when T.O. did his press conference and his workout in his driveway after Andy Reid kicked him out of camp. So in honor of that anniversary coming up this week, as well as number 5, we're going to do the whole what if Donovan McNabb and Terrell Owens were able to get along. And again, this to me is one of the biggest question marks and I think turning points in Eagles history, to be completely honest. There are, to me, a couple of those Buddy Ryan teams. There was a couple of questionable things here or there, but I think overall, this changed the whole course of the Eagles franchise for at least 3, 4, probably 5 years, as we're going to see as we dive into that. So to give you a little bit background story on the situation, after the Eagles went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots in 2004, T.O. wanted a new contract that offseason, and rightfully so. I mean, the man broke his leg late in that season, missed all the playoffs, busted his ass to get back for the Super Bowl. And not only did he play, he played well. And if they would have been able to win that game, he would have been the MVP, in my opinion. So he wanted a new contract, and the Eagles basically said, no, we just traded for you last year. We just gave you a new contract. He felt some type of way. He felt the Eagles screwed him, that he felt coerced, I think was the word he used, to sign that contract. So he fired his agent, who I believe was either a childhood friend or a personal friend of his, and hired Drew Rosenhaus, who Drew Rosenhaus is just known across the NFL as the guy who is going to hold out and try to get his clients the most money. And I mean, I don't blame him one bit. But in this case, T.O. felt that he was going to be in a better situation if Drew Rosenhaus was his agent. At the time, further complicating it, the Eagles had this ridiculous policy where they did not renegotiate with a lot of their players. It was an Andy Reid, Joe Banner thing. It's a stupid, dumb rule, but whatever. And I don't understand the rationale. I think usually that early in their contracts or something, they had so many different rules. They thought once you were 30, you were shot. So again, I don't know what they were thinking, but that was what they did. So T.O. did not hold out in camp that year, I don't think. But once he did come into camp, apparently one day, him and Andy Reid got into an argument, and Andy Reid sent him home. And then that was where, obviously, the media just gathered outside of his house, and he did his workouts. He was lifting weights. He was doing his sit-ups. He was saying no comment on everything. Come to find out years later that I forget, it wasn't his agent, but one of his friends, and I think it was one of the girls from, if you ever watched the T.O. reality show years ago on VH1, it was one of his friends was in his ear, like on an earpiece, basically telling him what to say. And it was a circus. And again, I think it's not up there with AI, or it's not going to overtake the AI practice press conference, but I think it's one of the most bizarre and just overall crazy press conference you'll ever see, because here it is, he got sent home from practice and he said, I got to stay in shape. And again, he was making fun of it. So again, it's frustrating because that team was poised to go back to the Super Bowl and make another run. As you know, they had been to the 3 straight NFC championships before that, all losses, 2 of them at home. The one that still annoys me the most was that Tampa Bay game, the last game at the Vet, but that's, again, another episode. This Eagles team from the Andy Reid days, I mean, take your pick. There's a ton of what-ifs from that entire era of football. Kind of goes back to, or just like the Buddy Ryan days, there's a ton of those what if questions, and there's just so many different ways you can go with it. So what's odd to me is those Buddy Ryan teams are still beloved to this day. And I don't know what it is. It's almost like they got a pass because of Buddy Ryan's personality, or the defense was good. It was like a tough team. It was still before the NFL got really big, but I don't know why they got a pass. I mean, the Eagles are coming out next year with the Kelly green jerseys and uniforms again, and I don't know why. Those teams, don't get me wrong, I love those jerseys, but they don't represent anything but failure and futility. Like, they didn't win anything. They had all the potential in the world and didn't win anything, much like Andy Reid's teams. But we are very, very critical of those Eagles teams under Andy Reid, specifically Donovan. And again, you guys know, I've mentioned it a few times, I am a big McNabb supporter. But I feel he gets a bad rep because of all that. I mean, this is probably the biggest or the best stretch of football ever in the history of the Eagles. Yet Buddy Ryan's team, who never won a playoff game and consistently underachieved, they're beloved in this town. And I'm guilty of it too. So don't think I'm making fun of people to do that. But it just, I don't know why. I don't know whether it's because I grew up on them. They helped me through some difficult times, just dealing with, but I remember when my grandfather was sick before that 91 season, but we kind of put that team on a pedestal, and we kind of just say, Andy Reid's McNabb's team, and they're this, they're that, and we're so critical of them, yet that was probably the best group. And I would say that those teams probably would have given the Super Bowl winning team, they probably would have beat them 6, maybe 7 times out of 10 if they played. So not sure why. I think, again, for me, it's when I was a kid with those Buddy Ryan teams. So you kind of, you overlook some of the warts, or maybe you don't realize, almost like, I look at it like me now as a parent. And I always thought my parents had it all figured out. Like, everything was smooth, like with Christmas and this, that. And it wasn't until I became a parent that I realized they didn't know what they were doing, because I don't know what I'm doing. You just, half the time you're flying by the seat of your pants. So, and I think you didn't see that as a kid. And I think that's what those Buddy Ryan teams represent. It's almost like, yeah, well, they're whatever. They're great. They're my team. They're my heroes. They're my boys. And with the Andy Reid teams, we knew better. We knew they were a good team. And it's almost like me as a parent. Like, I know what to do. It's just, we still don't know what you're doing. But I think the expectations were very, very high for those teams. And they were also underachievers. And I don't think there's any difference between the two teams. So why the Buddy Ryan teams get a pass and Andy Reid's don't? Especially because they sustained that success for a much longer time frame than the Buddy Ryan's team. But again, this kind of goes back to the first episode when I talked about the level of Philly fandoms. That's like, we expect greatness. And I think it's lazy journalism when people throw snowballs at Santa. They booed this, they booed that. Yeah, sure, some crazy shit happens at games, but it happens everywhere. Look at LA. after Dodgers games, people get killed. Like, at least you don't see people getting killed in Philly. Yeah, we'll throw a snowball at you, we'll boo you, get in your face, and blah, 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 but we're not going to kill you. We're not idiots. But anyway, and I think, again, I get very fired up, and I feel like I just went on a rant, but that team, that era of Eagle football, still to this day pisses me off, because they should at least have won one Super Bowl. And again, I don't want to get into the Tampa season, because that's a whole nother episode that's coming up down the road. But one of those teams should have won the Super Bowl. Again, they went to the 3 straight and they lost. 2 of them were at home. So that offseason, they signed T.O. After he was traded to Baltimore, there was like it was crazy. I just remember it was like a huge story for like a week, 10 days when they were trying to sign T.O. because T.O. wanted to come to Philly. The 49ers traded him to Baltimore, and T.O., I think, basically said, I'm not playing for them. I want to go play with Donovan and everything. But I just remember how big of a story it was, because those Eagles teams had good defenses under Jimmy Johnson, and they had guys like Brian Dawkins, Hugh Douglas, Trotter. So they had a good core group of guys. It's just they had no tools on offense, and a lot of those losses came down to Donovan and the offense not being able to move the ball. So signing T.O. was a huge pickup for them. I mean, we had crap receivers the whole time Donovan was here. James Thrash, Pinkston, Charles Johnson, who just recently passed away, Torrance Small. And Donovan still was a great quarterback. So I just remember being super, super excited as a season ticket holder to see this guy play with McNabb, and just how high the expectations were and how he was going to take McNabb's game to the next level. Even the preseason game, it was packed. Like, I've never seen, in the 22 years I've had season tickets, I've never seen a preseason game that packed. So of course they come out the first play, throw a deep bomb for a touchdown to T.O., and like, you would have thought it was one of the loudest games I've ever seen. And I've been to, when they won to both Super Bowls, it was at the 4th and 26 game. And that was up there as one of the top 5 loudest I've heard. And we just knew what was going to happen. And obviously they went on to have a great season. There were some things along the way that kind of red flags. The game in Pittsburgh that year, when T.O. was trying to, he claims, pump up Donovan. Donovan wanted no parts of it and was turning his back this way and that. But again, didn't think much of it. And then T.O. did get hurt by the Roy Williams horse collar tackle that actually helped lead to the rule change and make that a penalty. And again, I'll never forget, my dad went down with my brother and I, and it was just crazy because he's like, oh, this is great. We're down at the game. The year they're probably going to go to the Super Bowl. And all I could think about is like, how long is T.O. out? How long is T.O. out? And I felt so bad. And if you're listening, Dad, sorry. Like, I never told you that, but like, I felt bad because I was trying to get him out of the stadium. My brother was pissed off and yelling at people. And I'm just like, what about T.O.? So the game, the tailgate, everything was awesome, except for, like I said, that horse collar. But still a good story. Great time. And again, that whole Super Bowl itself, there's so many what ifs. And I will be having episodes on that in the future as well. But obviously they didn't come out on top. There was the McNabb puking in the huddle. Or allegedly, I still haven't seen the video of it, but there was also the Spygate, and whether or not the Patriots were spying on the Eagles practice. And some of the players on the team were interviewed, and they said, hey, it was like they knew our plays were coming. So either way, after that season is when all of this T.O. stuff happened in the preseason. But again, it's preseason. You didn't think he was going to miss any time. He said he was going to come back and play no matter what. So they came back, and they got off to somewhat of a slow start, which is pretty typical for a team that loses the Super Bowl, especially. McNabb bruised his sternum early, and then he also had a sports hernia that he was playing. So obviously they were struggling. It was a slow start, and there was an interview, and things were starting to get a little little crazy because of the going back to the training camp thing, but T.O. was interviewed by somebody, and they asked him the question, how would you guys be doing if Brett Favre was the quarterback of this team? I think was the way the question was worded. And he said, "Oh, we'd be undefeated." And of course, that was the part of the quote that was taken out of context, because 2 questions before, he also had said we'd be undefeated if Donovan wasn't banged up and whatnot. But again, the media, being who they are, took that quote and blew it up. And ultimately, it got basically divided the locker room. It was basically you were either on T.O.'s side or Donovan's side. And I think part of it was Donovan's ego. Part of it was just the Andy Reid kind of wanting to always run a tight ship. But either way, it led to T.O. being suspended, and then they eventually deactivated him for the rest of the season, essentially ending his time as a Philadelphia Eagle. So today's episode is about what if this could have been avoided? What if the whole T.O. Donovan saga never happened, or they could have gotten along, or they could have gone through it? There are the stories out there, and T.O. himself has said it, that all he wanted to do was to have McNabb vouch for him, because at the time McNabb was the missing link between ownership and the team. So he was the franchise quarterback. They listened to what he said, and T.O. obviously did wonders that 2004 season for Donovan's career. He's like, you know what? I just want the man to stick up for him and say, hey, pay him. So hold on to your seat right here, because this is definitely something you will not hear me say often, but now this is 2 episodes in a row I'm going to do it. But McNabb blew this. I really do think Donovan blew this. And I think it goes back to what I said last episode with questionable leadership and just the way he did it. I think he blew this. All he had to do was go, even if they did not give him the contract, fine, but go to them in the middle of a press conference, say, hey, I think he should pay. After what he did last year, I think he does deserve a new contract. That's all you had to say. The Eagles still, and then the ownership looks like the bad guys, but at least it comes off as you have T.O.'s back. And listen, maybe they would have listened to him. I mean, he was their guy. Maybe they realized, hey, we have some potential here. Let's get this guy under contract. And it could have been a link where McNabb sort of kept T.O. in check. So if he would have stuck up for him, the Eagles gave him a new contract. I mean, he definitely outplayed the other one. I mean, I'm sorry, but yes, it was only 1 year. Yes, you signed it, but whatever it is, I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask. And I do think, based on where the Eagles were before he came and what they did when he did come, it's a no-brainer. Pay the man. But subsequently, he was released, went to the Cowboys until about 2008, I think it was. And then mixed stories coming out. I wasn't sure, even to this day, whether Jerry Jones was just looking to go a different way, whether Tony Romo didn't like him, whether Jerry Jones was trying to save face with some of the fans, and because they had the new stadium coming up. But either way, he played for the Cowboys. They cut him. And then he played a season with the Bills in 2009. Still was relatively good that year. And then kind of bounced around. I think he went to the Bengals and then played in some minor league or whatever. But a key stat here is, for this whole what if, without T.O., T.O. for 6 games in 2005, but from 2005 to 2009, that 5-year period, the Eagles won 60% of their games. Now, keep in mind, they went 6-10 the 2005 season when all of this went down with T.O. So think about that. 60% of their games they won without T.O. So you keep him on the team. You saw what happened in 2004. Man, like, this, to me, this is why I get pissed off, and this is why I get so worked up. So, like, you think about it, if none of this would have happened in 2005, I don't think anything changes. I think they have the Super Bowl hangover. I think the injuries would have been too much for them to overcome. I mean, McNabb had a sports hernia, so there was nothing you could do. Maybe they go 7-9 instead of 6-10. I don't think they were going to beat the Seahawks that year anyway. That Seahawks team that went to the Super Bowl that lost to the Steelers, they were a good team. I had a few of their guys on my fantasy team that year. One of the few times I had a good fantasy team, but that's neither here nor there. The next year, though, they still won the division. Without T.O., McNabb got hurt. I think he tore his ACL that year, so that was the Jeff Garcia year. So let's assume that McNabb still tore his ACL. Garcia with T.O., I don't think they would have beaten the Bears that year. But you have a healthy McNabb who doesn't tear his ACL with T.O., they go to the Super Bowl. There's no way that Bears team, would they have lost? I think that was when the Bears lost to Peyton Manning and the Colts. Peyton Manning always played well and beat the Eagles. So, you know what? Even if they were healthy and went to the Super Bowl, I don't think they would have won that year. But that leads now into 2007. Brian Westbrook was a huge stud that year. Like, he really stepped into his own. So you have Brian Westbrook and T.O. on the same offense. They win the division going away. And then they go to the Super Bowl. They play the 19-0 Patriots, or the 18 at that point, the 18-0 Patriots, and I don't know. The Giants beat them. The Giants were a wild card team that barely snuck into the playoffs. Could the Eagles have won the Super Bowl in 2007? Absolutely. Could they have had revenge from the previous Super Bowl in 2004? Absolutely. Would they have done it? Who knows? Probably knowing the way the Eagles' luck is, they would have been the team that lost the Super Bowl and let the Patriots go 19-0. But either way, the following year, forget about it. They signed Asante Samuel that offseason. They win the wild card. The Giants had a very good step back up and had a good record that year. So I think they went 11-5. So even if the Eagles go 11-5, the NFC was weak that year. So I think the way everything fell down and broke, they would have still played the way it did. The Cardinals come to Philly that year, and they beat them at home. They go to the Super Bowl. They beat the Steelers. Sorry to all my Pittsburgh people, but I think of all of the teams, that was probably the other Steelers win was probably over the Seahawks. Was probably a little bit better of a team, I think, than the 2008 team. So I think they won a Super Bowl there. I think the following year, they go back. They definitely win the division again. I mean, they were Them was a dominant team even before T.O. So I think they win the division again. I don't know if they beat Drew Brees and the Saints. That team was good, especially because they probably would have had to go to New Orleans to beat that. But again, once you get to the NFC Championship game, who knows? Anything could happen. 2010, they're both getting older, and the Packers won it that year. They won the Super Bowl that year as the 6th seed. Could they have made it out of the NFC and gone to the Super Bowl again? Absolutely. But I think at that point, that's sort of where it ends. I think they start getting older. The play starts probably going downhill. I mean, that's what happened to them anyway. But I think they win at least out of all those teams or years, I think they win at least one Super Bowl, possibly two. And I think it changes. Andy Reid doesn't leave. He is revered, loved in Philly. He's probably here forever like Bill Belichick is in New England. I think the way things would play out and with the numbers, I think T.O. is in the Hall of Fame right now. I think Donovan is a borderline. I think you can make the case for him to be a pro or Hall of Fame quarterback. I don't think he's there. I think he's that next tier down. But you have 5 years of playing with T.O. on top of that. Forget about it. He is 100% a Hall of Famer. First ballot. Maybe they go in together. Who knows? So all of that, again, maybe I'm out of my mind. Make sure you let me know what you think. Hit me up on Twitter. Put some comments in there. But I really do think that even the perception of Donovan sticking up for T.O., that changes the whole outlook of the entire situation. Now, you have to throw in the caveat that look at his history. Look at what happened in San Francisco. Look at, obviously, what happened in Philly. Look at what happened in Dallas. He was just on the news the other day. It's very ironic, yelling at his neighbor. Now, granted, I think some of the situations were not necessarily his fault. I think he was allowed to do what he did because he had the talent, and during that time frame, it's a little changing a little bit now, but wide receivers were the divas back then. So you had guys like Chad Johnson, you had T.O. I don't know why I can't think of his name now. The guy that put the cell phone from the Saints, Joe Horn. You had guys doing outrageous things, and I think the teams allowed some of those things to happen because of how good the players were. I think Andy Reid really did try to let some of those things go, but again, you can't have a player screaming at you in the locker room during training camp. Right or wrong, his perception was that he's bashing his quarterback on the news. I think you got to be smarter than that and check out the entire interview and all the quotes. But again, he tried to let it go, and I think he got to the point where he didn't. However, if Donovan would have just said, yo, pay the man his money, I think he deserves it. And again, the Eagles didn't have to do anything with that. And I think what happens then is you have the locker room not divided. You have T.O. saying, yo, look what happened. He had the press conference in Dallas where he started crying about Romo. Like, that's my quarterback, man. That could have been Donovan. All he had to do was say, pay him. Andy, Joe, pay the guy his money. And whether or not they did or not, it doesn't matter. T.O. would have cried. They would have had 5 more years together. They would have won at least one more Super Bowl, been to another one or two. There you go. All you had to do was say pay him. It still annoys me to this day. I promise I'm going to get off of some of you guys I know, or especially guys in my season ticket group, KC. You love the fact that I'm bashing Donovan right now, but I promise I'm not going to be bashing him anymore. But it's very irritating when it was, to me, it's such a simple thing, and he let his ego get in the way. So instead, you have that Eagles team during the whole Andy Reid 13 years he was there make it to 1 Super Bowl, 5 NFC championship games, 0 titles. And I gave the stat earlier, 60% of their games, 60%. They were hands down one of the best teams in the league during that 5-year period, yet they couldn't get it done because they were all, and it's not like the NFC was that good. I mean, they could have beaten that Giants team with Eli Manning. They definitely could have beaten that Bears team if everybody was healthy. They absolutely could have beaten Aaron Rodgers' Super Bowl winning team, who were a wild card team. That Saints team that won, I'll give you that. They were a good team. But it was not like they were gangbuster teams. They could have done it, but McNabb couldn't have said anything. So ultimately, to me, that whole era is a waste. And it's still perplexing to me, as I said earlier, they don't get the pass. But Buddy Ryan's team, who choked way worse than any of the Andy Reid teams, at least they were consistently good and they were in the hunt all the time. After the Fog Bowl, you knew those Buddy Ryan teams were going to lose every playoff game they had. So it's definitely, and once Buddy Ryan left, of course they win one. But again, I do think that T.O. took them over the hump in 2004 and could have kept them over the hump. And again, I don't think they ever truly got back until they won the Super Bowl year. And I don't know if they've ever truly gotten back to that level. So again, ultimately, as Eagles fans, we got ours. T.O. never won a Super Bowl. He is a Hall of Famer. Donovan never won. He's a borderline Hall of Famer. And Andy got his. So think about that. The city of Philadelphia, we got our Super Bowl. Andy Reid left to go to Kansas City, got his Super Bowl. Donovan and T.O. couldn't play nice. Neither one of them got one. And again, both of them are at fault, but I think they both let their ego get in the way. And I personally think at the time I even said this, and yeah, he signed the contract, but I mean, he busted his ass to come back. The man had a broken leg. He was sleeping in hyperbaric chambers to get back. And just pay the man. And Donovan, stick up for your boy. You were a good quarterback. That year you were great. And guess what? You blew it because of your ego. And as far as the Eagles not wanting to kind of at least entertain the idea of paying him, it's just typical of the front office at that time. And they were more busy spending money on people that were plug-in players instead of just paying. Jeremiah Trotter, they cut him. They bring in like 100-year-old Levon Kirkland, who Joe Jaravicius is still running down Broad Street right now because he was so wide open in that game. But again, that's a whole nother story, another episode. We'll get to that. And again, you think I'm getting fired up for this one? Whew, I might need to have a couple drinks before that Tampa Bay one. But again, so the bottom line is ego kills. And that is my one knock against Donovan. I think he definitely had the talent. His ego, he just let that get the best of him. And because he didn't want to share the spotlight. I don't know what his rationale or thinking was, but it's beyond irritating. Randall Cunningham, same thing. His ego got in the way, and I think that's why it's good, or it's easy to compare those Buddy Ryan teams with the Donovan McNabb, Andy Reid era. Carson Wentz, kind of, I don't know if it was ego or what, but he felt some type of way because Nick Foles got all the glory for winning the Super Bowl, and I think he never actually recovered. So, like, it's definitely ego kills. You got to put the ego aside. Look at Nick Foles. Okay, whatever. You need me to be a backup? Fine. You need me to be the starter? Fine. Okay, I'm going to retire. Oh, you want me to come and be a backup? Great. That's kind of the attitude you need. You still have to see what Jalen Hurts does. I think he says the right things. He has kind of the right makeup, so we shall see. But again, this specific what if to this day still pisses me off, and I don't care what anybody says. This is why Philly fans are the way they are. It's these types of things. Situations like this, I feel, happen more in Philly than anywhere else. Like, there's no reason why you have all that talent and you can't win one. And I'll be completely honest, the Sixers of today with Embiid, the whole process there, they're borderline close to being on this same level, which is even more irritating. But again, that's for another time. Ugh! Anyway, follow me on Twitter, Jimbo_Mont, MONT. Subscribe, like, give me your comments on this. Am I way out of whack? Could the marriage between the two never have worked? Would they have never have won as much as I thought? But again, now that we're getting into some of these, we're not going to do a lot of fluffy topics all the time like we have been. I think we got to get into some of these deeper, and I'm trying to, if nothing else, start a conversation with everybody and make you think about certain teams and certain eras a different way. But if nothing else, give people who are not from here just a little insight. This is why we are the way we are. But all right, time to turn this thing up. And thank you guys for listening. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts on this because I feel I'm very close to the situation because of being down there for all of the games basically during the Andy Reid McNabb era. So I definitely have like that personal vibe, personal connection. But let me know what you think. Am I out of line? Am I crazy? Am I spot on? Would they have won more Super Bowls? Let me know. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.